What if telling the truth meant losing everything? Not just your reputation, not just your fans, but everything. In Hollywood, where image is currency and silence sells, some LGBTQ+ stars chose honesty and paid the ultimate price. Careers, roles, pulled. Doors that once swung wide open, slammed shut without warning. But they didn't stay quiet. They came out anyway. In this video, it's not just about fame. It's about what happens when truth collides with power, and power pushes back. Which of these stories hit you the hardest? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe these voices deserve to be heard, subscribe to LGBTQ+ Vibes, where real stories finally find their spotlight. When Elliot Page came out as transgender in 2020, the world applauded on the surface. Headlines celebrated his courage, but Hollywood responded with cold silence. After years of acclaim in films like Juno and Inception, Elliot suddenly found himself without major offers. Scripts stopped coming, directors hesitated, casting agents quietly dropped his name from shortlists. Even ongoing roles, like in The Umbrella Academy, were renegotiated under immense pressure. Elliot had gained his identity, but lost the career momentum he had spent decades building. And yet, he remained unapologetic, choosing truth over comfort. His story reminds us that for trans actors, coming out is not the end of a journey, it's the beginning of a battle. Kristen Stewart, once dubbed the queen of teen franchises after Twilight, Kristen Stewart was everywhere until she decided to live her truth. After quietly coming out and showing up on red carpets with female partners, the backlash hit fast. Studio executives began pulling back. Offers for blockbuster leads declined. Directors labeled her difficult to brand. She was told her openness made her less relatable to audiences. Some scripts were pulled without explanation. For years, Kristen retreated into indie films, not by choice, but by necessity. It was only when the industry began to evolve that she was welcomed back into bigger spaces. Her career survived, but the cost was clear. In Hollywood, being queer and visible was never part of the plan. Kristen Stewart, once dubbed the queen of teen franchises after Twilight, Kristen Stewart was everywhere until she decided to live her truth. After quietly coming out and showing up on red carpets with female partners, the backlash hit fast. Studio executives began pulling back. Offers for blockbuster leads declined. Directors labeled her difficult to brand. She was told her openness made her less relatable to audiences. Some scripts were pulled without explanation. For years, Kristen retreated into indie films, not by choice, but by necessity. It was only when the industry began to evolve that she was welcomed back into bigger spaces. Her career survived, but the cost was clear. In Hollywood, being queer and visible was never part of the plan. In the 1980s, Rupert Everett was poised to become Hollywood's next leading man. He had the looks, the accent, the charm, and he also had a secret. But Rupert didn't keep it for long. In 1989, at the height of his rising fame, he came out as gay. What followed wasn't celebration, it was silence. Big roles stopped arriving. Studios that once welcomed him no longer returned calls. He was told flat out, gay men couldn't play romantic leads. Despite starring in hits like My Best Friend's Wedding, the damage had been done. Rupert has said openly, coming out ruined my career. But he never regretted it. He chose to live honestly, even if that honesty cost him the career he had worked so hard to build. His journey is a cautionary tale wrapped in courage and a reminder that visibility in Hollywood still comes with a price tag. He turned rejection into resilience, forging his own path in an industry that tried to erase him. Hunter Schafer burst onto the scene in Euphoria, mesmerizing viewers with her performance and presence. As a transgender woman, her very existence on screen was revolutionary. But behind the beauty and breakthrough, Hunter has faced a wave of pressure that few ever see. From online harassment to casting skepticism, she has had to fight harder just to be seen as an actress, not a statement. Even as brands celebrated her visibility, whispers about whether she could lead a mainstream project persisted. In a supposedly progressive industry, the doors remain half-closed, and the weight of representation can be crushing. Hunter has spoken about the exhaustion of carrying expectations, not just as a performer, but as a symbol. Yet she keeps showing up, boldly, reminding the world that trans talent is not a trend, it's here to stay. For Chaz Bono, the price of truth was deeply personal. Born to music royalty, Sonny and Cher, he was thrust into the public eye from childhood. In the late 1990s, he came out as a lesbian and faced public backlash. But in 2009, when Chaz transitioned and came out as a transgender man, the criticism turned cruel. Media outlets mocked his appearance, offers stopped, invitations dried up, even parts of the LGBTQ+ community struggled to understand. While others were applauded for being themselves, Chaz was dissected and dismissed. He lost opportunities, endorsements, and was reduced to tabloid fodder. Yet he persisted, writing, speaking, and showing the world that transition is not about spectacle, but survival. His courage paved the way for trans visibility, even as it cost him nearly everything else. Chaz continues to advocate for trans rights, proving that strength isn't just about surviving. It's about using your scars to light the path for others. Not every fall from grace is loud. Sometimes it happens in whispers, endorsement deals that never finalize, TV invitations that stop coming, headlines that quietly move on. When Ricky Martin came out in 2010, the world cheered, but the business world pulled back. Though beloved globally, Ricky saw brand collaborations fade, radio airplay decline in conservative markets, and his crossover momentum slow. It was as if the very thing that made him more human made him less marketable. For years, he had hidden his truth to protect his career. Now that he lived freely, parts of the industry no longer saw him the same. Ricky didn't just come out for himself, he did it knowing he might lose the spotlight. And even as it dimmed, he stayed exactly who he was, proud, resilient, and unshakably honest. Behind the music and fame was a man who chose authenticity over applause and gave a generation permission to do the same. Some prices are paid in silence, others in prime time. When Grey's Anatomy was at its peak, Knight made the brave decision to come out publicly after a backstage incident forced his hand. But what followed wasn't support, it was erasure. His character was slowly written off, screen time reduced, and before long, he was gone from the series altogether. While fans speculated, Knight quietly carried the weight of being the only openly gay male lead on a major network show at the time. The industry wasn't ready, and he bore the consequences. In interviews, he later shared the anxiety and isolation he felt during that period. He didn't come out for applause. He came out because silence was killing him. And though the applause faded, the integrity never did. Knight walked away from the spotlight with his dignity intact, proving that self-respect is sometimes the only role worth fighting for. Some actors become household names, others become foundations, quiet, steady, and essential. Wong is one of the latter. With powerful roles in Jurassic Park, Law & Order SVU, and Mr. Robot, he built a stellar career. But when he publicly came out as gay in the early 2000s, casting dynamics shifted. Suddenly, leading man offers vanished. He was told, directly and indirectly, that his sexuality limited his range. It wasn't about talent, it was about perception. BD pivoted to stage work and voice acting, where authenticity mattered more than image. He kept building, but never forgot how quickly the rules changed once he told the truth. He once said, "It's not that they stopped calling, it's that they stopped seeing." And that, for many actors, is a deeper loss than rejection. Even so, he chose presence over pretense and became an icon of strength without needing the spotlight to define him. Sometimes courage comes late, but hits harder because of it. Ian McKellen was already a seasoned Shakespearean actor when he came out as gay in 1988, during a radio debate over a proposed British law banning promotion of homosexuality. He was 49. While his truth inspired millions, the industry was not immediately kind. Certain casting directors quietly turned away. Some roles vanished, without explanation. Yet, Ian didn't flinch. He leaned in, transforming his career into something bigger than just performance. From Gandalf to Magneto, he became a global icon, while never hiding who he was again. But the truth remains, had he come out sooner, his journey might have looked very different. He paid a quiet price, but in doing so, opened doors for others to walk through more freely. Sir Ian turned adversity into legacy. His voice didn't just echo on stage, it rewrote what dignity in the face of delay can look like. It was 1997 when Ellen DeGeneres made television history by saying two simple words, "I'm gay." Both in real life and in character, she came out to the world. The applause was immediate, but the backlash was brutal. Her sitcom was canceled. Advertisers pulled out. She was blacklisted from major networks. For years, Ellen disappeared from Hollywood, a comedian without a stage. The same industry that once embraced her turned cold. Depression followed. Self-doubt crept in, but eventually she came back stronger, launching a new show that redefined daytime TV. Still, the gap in her career was real, and the trauma lasting. Ellen's story is a triumph, yes, but it's also a reminder that telling the truth can cost you everything before it sets you free. She paved a way for countless others by walking through fire and still returning with grace. For some, coming out is a quiet revolution. Sara Gilbert, known for her roles in Roseanne and The Talk, lived in the public eye for most of her life. But behind the scenes, she struggled with how and when to share her truth. When she finally came out in the early 2000s, she was terrified of what it might do to her career. While she wasn't met with outright rejection, opportunities didn't grow either. Producers hesitated. Certain roles slipped away. Even on The Talk, she often held back when conversations turned personal. Sara once said, "I didn't want to be defined by my orientation." And yet, in staying silent for so long, she felt invisible. Her story is one of quiet bravery, a woman learning to speak at her own pace, even in a world that demanded either silence or spectacle. She reminds us that there's more than one way to be out, and every version still matters. At first glance, Colton Haynes had everything: fame, beauty, and a fan base that adored him in shows like Teen Wolf and Arrow. But behind the scenes, he was unraveling. For years, he was told to keep quiet about his sexuality. Studio handlers warned him, "You'll lose your audience." So he played the game, attended fake dates, gave vague interviews, smiled through the pain. When he finally came out in 2016, it was a cry for survival. His mental health had crumbled under the pressure. And while he received praise from fans, casting offers slowed. The leading man roles he once landed effortlessly were suddenly out of reach. Coming out didn't kill his career, but it wounded it. And it forced Colton to rebuild not just his image, but his entire sense of self. His vulnerability became his power, showing young queer fans that healing is messy, but always worth it. Matt Bomer's rise was as smooth as his charm. With his breakout role in White Collar, he quickly became a fan favorite and a studio darling. But in 2012, when he casually thanked his partner during an awards speech, everything changed. It wasn't a dramatic coming out, just a moment of honesty. Yet the backlash from within the industry was immediate. Producers began to doubt his believability as a straight romantic lead. Big-budget scripts disappeared. Roles he was once shortlisted for went to others. Matt has said very little about the shift, but those close to him noticed. He continued to work, yes, but not in the same spotlight he once owned. His decision to be real came with a cost, and it's one many still pretend doesn't exist. Still, he never looked back, because loving freely was a bigger reward than any role on screen. Few coming-out moments have been as bold or as risky as Lil Nas X's. In the midst of his Old Town Road global takeover, he revealed he was gay. The music world, especially within hip-hop and black culture, responded with a mix of celebration and backlash. He was accused of ruining his image, mocked by fellow artists, and even booed at some events. But Lil Nas X didn't retreat. He doubled down. With provocative visuals and unapologetic lyrics, he turned his queerness into power. Yet behind the confidence was real cost. Lost collaborations, strained industry ties, and threats that came daily. He transformed resistance into revolution, proving that queer artists don't need permission to exist at center stage. Every track became a protest, every video a declaration. And through it all, he smiled, because being himself was the greatest chart topper of all. In the late 90s, Lance Bass stood at the top of the pop world as a member of NSYNC. But while millions screamed his name, he was quietly drowning in fear. The pressure to stay in the closet was relentless, from managers, labels, and even fans. He played the role, straight dates, rehearsed interviews, and a smile that masked suffocation. When he finally came out in 2006, long after the group disbanded, the support was warm, but also late. Lance admitted he didn't come out sooner because he feared it would ruin everything. And in many ways, it could have. He watched others lose careers, and he wasn't ready to risk it. His story is a painful reminder that even at the height of success, some truths feel too dangerous to speak. And yet, when he finally did, he gained something far more valuable than fame: peace. Joel Kim Booster didn't fit anyone's mold. A gay, Korean-American comedian raised in a conservative Christian household, he entered Hollywood with no blueprint and even fewer allies. When he began incorporating his sexuality and racial identity into his work, he was told to dial it down. Agencies passed, rooms went silent. But Joel kept pushing. Eventually, he broke through with Fire Island, a film unapologetically queer and Asian. Still, he faced criticism from both outside and within the LGBTQ+ community. Too bold, too specific, too political. The very traits that made his voice vital were seen as risky. Joel didn't lose one big job for being out. He lost dozens of smaller chances, rooms he never got into, shows he never got to pitch. But he succeeded anyway, not by changing himself, but by creating space where others like him could finally exist. He proved that you don't need to fit the mold to break it. She grew up in America's living rooms. As the child star of The Cosby Show and later That's So Raven, Raven-Symoné was more than famous. She was iconic. But behind the bright energy was a young woman terrified of her truth. Raven didn't publicly come out until her late 20s, admitting she had been afraid of losing everything she built. Even after coming out, she was cautious, avoiding LGBTQ+ labels, sidestepping political topics, and carefully managing her image. She later revealed that Disney advised her not to make her private life public, fearing backlash. Her experience proves that even in family-friendly fame, the weight of hiding is real, and the pressure to be marketable can silence even the boldest voices. Raven once said, "I didn't want to be labeled, I just wanted to be me." Her quiet resistance became a quiet revolution, showing that authenticity doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply stands firm. Keiynan Lonsdale was a rising star with a growing fan base, thanks to roles in The Flash and Love, Simon. But even after starring in a landmark gay teen romance, he didn't feel ready to come out publicly. The fear ran deep, not just of public opinion, but of the industry machine. When he finally did come out as bisexual and gender fluid, the shift was subtle, but real. Some calls stopped coming. Certain auditions went cold. Though he was celebrated on social media, behind the scenes he sensed a chill. He said, "Coming out didn't make me braver overnight. It just made me more aware of who was never really on my side." His story shows that visibility matters, but it still comes with invisible costs. Still, Keiynan chose vulnerability over silence, and in doing so, inspired countless others to stand in the space between fear and freedom. For much of his early career, George Michael lived two lives. As the voice behind Faith and Careless Whisper, he was a global sex symbol. But the real man stayed hidden. Fearing the backlash that had crushed other artists, George remained closeted throughout the 80s and early 90s. It wasn't until a public scandal in 1998 forced his hand that he came out. The world reacted with shock and judgment. Radio stations pulled his songs. Tabloids had a field day. Despite his massive talent, he was never treated the same again. George spent the rest of his life reclaiming his identity, turning pain into activism and art. But one truth remains: he never got to come out on his own terms, and the industry never truly forgave him for being real. And yet, in every note he sang after, you could hear the voice of a man finally unburdened, even if the world never stopped punishing him for it. They told the truth, and the world turned its back. These stars lost roles, respect, and sometimes everything, just for being who they are. But they spoke anyway. Their courage wasn't always loud, it wasn't always rewarded, but it was real. And that matters. Thank you for watching. If their stories moved you, subscribe to LGBTQ+ Vibes and help us keep their voices alive, because being seen should never come at such a high cost. Let's keep the conversation going. Drop a comment below and remind the world, no one should ever have to choose between their truth and their dreams.